Good evening, and welcome to the AJP Northeast Asia Market Close. China pulled ahead on powerful export data, while Korea and Japan remained caught in the semiconductor reset ahead of tonight's U.S. jobs report. The three markets split around two forces. Investors across the region were cautious before U.S. payrolls, which could reset expectations for the Federal Reserve. But China had something Korea and Japan did not, a strong domestic data surprise. Chinese exports jumped nearly 24% from a year earlier in July, and imports rose about 28%, lifting mainland shares, even as oil climbed on renewed Middle East risk. Korea and Japan remained exposed to fading enthusiasm around artificial intelligence-linked chips, yet this was no simple technology sell-off. SK hynix and Japan's Advantest fell sharply, while Samsung Electronics held slightly higher. Samsung Electro-Mechanics rallied nearly 4%, and fast retailing offset part of Tokyo's tech weakness. The market is rotating inside sectors rather than abandoning risk in one direction. The KOSPI closed down around 0.6% at roughly 6,259, leaving the benchmark with a seventh consecutive weekly decline as enthusiasm around AI-linked chip stocks continued to cool. SK hynix was the clearest pressure point. The high bandwidth memory leader fell nearly 5% to around 1,422,000 won, about $1,003. But the rest of the tape refused to confirm a broad chip rout. Samsung Electronics edged up about 0.2% to around 231,000 won, about $163. Samsung Electro-Mechanics climbed nearly 4% to around 1,278,000 won, about $902. That divergence is the story. Investors were still cutting exposure to the most crowded memory trade, but were willing to buy selected suppliers elsewhere in the technology chain. Seoul fell, but today looked more like discrimination within semiconductors than wholesale capitulation. Shanghai was a clear regional outperformer. The Shanghai Composite was currently trading up around 0.7% at roughly 3,927, supported by trade figures showing China's export engine remaining far stronger than its domestic economy might suggest. July exports rose nearly 24% from a year earlier, and imports increased about 28%. But the stock moves complicate the headline. Optical networking heavyweight Zhongji Inolite fell nearly 4% to around 919 yuan, while Eoptolink slipped about 0.3% to around 420 yuan. So this was not another simple Chinese AI rally. Energy provided the cleaner upside. CNOOC rose about 1.2% to around 31 yuan, as Brent crude gained around 1.5% on renewed concern over Middle East supply and shipping risks. China was rising on trade resilience and energy exposure, while some prominent AI-linked names moved the other way. Tokyo finished almost exactly flat. The Nikkei 225 closed down less than 0.1% at around 65,637, but the COM index concealed another sharp split underneath. Semiconductor test equipment maker Advantest fell about 2.6% to around 32,070 yen, while SoftBank Group, one of Japan's clearest proxies for global AI risk appetite, lost nearly 2% to around 5,589 yen. Fast retailing moved the other way, gaining about 0.7% to around 79,450 yen, and helping keep the price-weighted Nikkei from following its technology leaders lower. The dollar was also on track for a weekly gain against the yen, while markets are already looking toward the Bank of Japan's September meeting for another possible rate increase. Tokyo ended balanced between weak technology leadership, support from a major consumer heavyweight, and continuing currency uncertainty. So the regional split was not simply China up and Korea and Japan down. China had fresh export numbers and rising energy stocks. Korea and Japan had to absorb another round of pressure in crowded technology names, even as selected suppliers and consumer stocks resisted. The next test comes from the United States. If payrolls revive expectations for tighter Federal Reserve policy, does this rotation broaden, or does pressure return to the same high valuation technology trades? We will be back next week to see how Northeast Asia responds to the U.S. jobs report and whether China's export-driven outperformance can survive the next round of policy and geopolitical risk. For daily Northeast Asia market coverage, please subscribe. Thank you for watching AJP.